Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Red Tinted Glasses podcast. Break for emergency because this weekend the Dons have been very active in the transfer market. Left back Emmanuel Gifami has been signed from Schalke 04, and just today, Sunday the 8th of June, we have signed our first striker of the window. Kusini Yengi joins the Dons on a 3-year contract from Portsmouth after his contract ended at the Championship club. Delighted on this episode to be joined by Freddie Webb from the PO4Cast Podcast to run us through our latest striking option. So, Freddie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Glenn. How are you? You've been well over the summer?
Yeah, well, I thought I was going to have another couple of weeks off before having to do a podcast until you hit us up on Twitter and said you could give us the download. So we can't pass up an opportunity to hear some fan insight into our latest signing. So thank you very much for that.
No, that's fine. And happy to give Aberdeen fans some info on Kusini Yengi. My co-hosts make fun of me an awful lot because I do watch Scottish football sometimes, despite being down in England. So I know a bit more than some people do, but I'm still not an expert by any manner of means. But yeah, they're always making fun, saying I watch too much Scottish football, but there we are.
Well, I think that's really a perfect place to start then. How do you think Kusini Yengi will fare making the move from English football? Had a decent season in League One when you guys won the league. Didn't play too much last season in the Championship. His younger brother, Tete, plays for Livingston. Do you think Kusini will fit well into Aberdeen and Scottish football?
I think the move to the SPL is probably a really good one for him, largely because he can face different levels of opposition in the same league. Because obviously in the SPL you have the old firm, then a little bit in the usually like a mid-table cluster of teams with European faces and then others further down. When I immediately thought about where Yengi could turn up after he was released from Pompey in the summer, I thought the majority of League One teams might take a punt on him because I think in his first season he did particularly well for us, and we'll go through that in a bit more detail. And many thought, he probably needs another season in League One before reaching higher levels. But considering the SPL is, for me, it sort of fits in a grey area. Some of the matches can be like Championship standards, some of them could be a bit below that, and then you've got the old firm as well. I think just the level might be very good for him, and he's probably heard from Tete about how he's fared in Scottish football and thought, well, he's already come out and said that the project in Aberdeen looks like a good one. So no, I think the level wise, I think he'll fit in fairly well with the physicality of it and some of the quirks of it. But we'll go through it in a bit more detail. Alongside the positive, there are some flaws to his game, I think.
Yeah, and I saw another Portsmouth fan in our mentions this evening on Twitter that I think he's a football manager researcher for Portsmouth and said, statistically wise, Yengi has a lot of good aspects to his game that will fit in. I suppose one thing I also want to address, when he first made the move to Portsmouth, what was the view from the Pompey fans? Were they underwhelmed? Because it's certainly a signing that, hasn't exactly captured the imagination of the Aberdeen support. Underwhelming probably is a word to use. I'm not going to say I'm writing him off at this stage. I also don't feel he's going to be our main number 9. I don't say that with any real confidence. I just say that in belief, given his record of last season and also injuries, that I would hope we're probably spending a bit more money on an out-and-out striker. So how did Portsmouth fans take to him when he first joined the club?
Yeah, so overall, Kusini Yengi was signed as a supplementary player to Pompey's current starting striker, Colby Bishop, who, after a heart condition scare where he had to have surgery at the beginning of the season, he's evolved into an excellent Championship striker. He's made the step up from scoring over 20 goals at League One level to being incredibly effective at Championship level. Yengi was brought in as a different sort of player to supplement him. So he came in from Western Sydney Wanderers in the A-League for a small 6-figure fee at the time.
Yeah.
2-year deal with a club option to extend him. So all that was, as if the club like with IC, they could hit the extension, automatically go, might have had a small wage bump in there as well. So in the League One season, where he had his better form for Pompey, he was largely used off the bench, played across all the cup competitions as well. So he made 31 appearances in total, 13 goals, 2 assists, but only from 1,160 minutes. So he effectively played about 11 full sets of 90 minutes, or just over that. He started off in scored his first goals against Forest Green in the League Cup, and then gradually progressed from there. The fans really took to him to start with, largely because he scored important goals in important games. His best performance that I remember was when Pompey played against Bolton Wanderers on Sky Sports on TV. Top of the table clash at the time, 2 promotion chasers playing each other. Pompey won 2-0 at Fratton Park, and Yengi was matched against their best centre-half at the time, Ricardo Santos, who was a big, strong centre-half, almost like a quarterback, because a lot of the play that Bolton had played through him, because that was just the playing out from the back. That was the style that they wanted to play. And Kusini Yengi was on top of him all the time, wrestling for the ball through aerial duels, whether it was a high ball, whether it was a through ball. And he thrived in that match, and then scored late to secure it 2-0. Drifted into the 6-yard box ahead of him, low cross straight into him. He tucks it home into the corner. And there was another goal I remember, again, against another promotion rival in Peterborough United, where Pompey were playing deeper in that game, hit a counter-attack, through ball from the halfway line to Yengi, and he dribbled pretty much about halfway in the opposition area to the penalty area, hits it low and hard, tucks it right into the corner. And that's the sort of striker that you can get. He likes to dribble when he can get onto the ball. He's a handful for individual defenders. He loves to get into those very typical striker-defender battles where he wants to get the better of his man all the time, and he wants to get into those spaces into the penalty area in the right situation to score goals. He wins his aerial duels slightly above average in League One, so he was able to get ahead of his defenders in that sense, and can win the ball high up the pitch sometimes. And he's used to playing in a 4-2-3-1, and I've seen that Aberdeen do play like that. So depending on how the 4-2-3-1 is set up, he can play on his own as an out-and-out striker. He's played in a pair before with Colby Bishop, but again, that was largely him coming on off the bench to add a little bit of something else if Pompey were behind, just to have an extra number. Predominantly, he's played on his own. And in the league, just for League One specifically, out of his 26 appearances, he had 9 goals, 0 assists, played 866 minutes, so just over 10 full sets of 90 minutes, but he only started 7 of those matches. So he was sort of like the typical impact substitute, but he was always an option because Colby Bishop is a bit of a target man striker, but he can't do the scenarios where he runs in between the lines. One thing I kind of through balls and everything else. So he offered Pompey a very good option in that League One season, but we'll go into it in a bit more detail where it didn't translate to Championship level.
Yeah, and I kind of just want to stay on the League One side of things for a moment. Probably so do you as well, given how last season turned out a little bit in the Championship. But kind of hearing you speak about the physical aspects, I think, we spoke before we actually recorded this episode that I do think Kusini will fit into Scottish football well in terms of how he deals with the physical nature of the defenders. Also, watching some of the highlights, I saw that goal against Peterborough away, that he scored some great limbs behind the goal as well. But also, as you say, the pace that he showed to get into the box, the technical feat, and those that follow us on Twitter as well will have saw the goal that I posted last night. I spoke to Alan McCarley, of course, who we spoke to after the signing of Milanovic, given that Yengi's previous club was Western Sydney Wanderers. The goal that I posted was his goal in the derby, very similar vein to that goal against Peterborough that Freddie just describes there as well. And I think one takeaway from me is how he does well off the shoulder of the last defender. But when watching back some of his goals for Portsmouth, again, specifically in League One, he seems quite a nuisance player, is the word that I was writing down as you were speaking there, Freddie. He's strong, he's a target man, but again, from the goals in his time at Portsmouth, at set set piece specifically, that's where he seemed to really come alive.
Yeah, he was definitely a handful in League One and grew into the level because we spoke to an A-League expert before, just after he signed, and there were some concerns about how he would adapt to the English game an awful lot because in Australia it's a lot less physical. That was the main difference. The focus was on the technical side of things. Physicality-wise, he's not like a stereotypical target man. I'm trying to think of SPL target men as an example, but for some
I think
reason,
it's probably, from a Scottish football point of view, you look at the likes of Sam Cosgrove that came up here, didn't have a great record, kind of went off the boil at Barnsley last season a little bit as well. Sam Dalby, not the best records, had a pretty decent season by all standards for Dundee United as well. So just because the record might not be brilliant doesn't necessarily means it translate that way when they come north of the border.
Yeah, precisely. And yeah, he's not in the out and out target man mold of a Sam Cosgrove, for example. He's a lot more mobile. He offers a lot more off the ball, and in that League One season, he was able to harry individual defenders and then to be able to break off them, get that space in the penalty area with low crosses or through balls coming in for him to just tuck it into the corner. And the fact that he was able to score a lot with not getting as much minutes on the pitch was definitely a good thing that he managed. So from his 9 goals, he scored them from just over 7 expected goals, which is in the top 20% of strikers in League One, just for the quality of chances created with expected goals. 3 of those goals were penalties. So depending on how Aberdeen do with penalties, he's an option there. What I will say is, in terms of the physicality, we'll go on to one of the main reasons why I didn't work at championship level, which was the injuries.
Yeah.
But physicality-wise, he's not the best at pressing off the ball. That was one of the main things that it didn't work for Pompey in the championship, where in League One, we're playing a bit more possession-based, a bit more creative, but the step up to championship level was way too much, and Pompey had to focus on winning the ball high up the pitch to be able to essentially create goals from almost nothing, where they had 3 or 4 passes from halfway across the opposition half into the penalty area to score goals.
I think that's quite key there, though, what you've said there, because Jimmy Tulline in his first season has shown he wants to be a possession-based manager and wants to, try and play nice free-flowing football. So that potentially ticks a lot of boxes for Yengi. But I just wonder, when we're out of possession, out of the Scottish Cup final, how that role fits him in. It could be, like I predict, potentially that impact second striker option when the main striker's not necessarily working for us during that 90 minutes.
Yeah, precisely. And off the ball, that is one of the concerns that was brought up. And it was also, it's a strange one, because really in the championship, it didn't get going at all. So I'll go into that a little bit more detail. So obviously you mentioned 0 goals and 0 assists. That was one of the big markers that fans would have noticed.
Yeah.
He only made 14 appearances for Pompey this season, only 4 of them where he started. A large amount of that was due to injuries. So he had 4 different injury spells throughout the season just gone. The main one was a posterior cruciate ligament damage in his knee in November while he picked up for an international duty, because he's played at international level with Australia, scored goals in Asian World Cup qualifying. So he's played at big stages for his country. So he's got that good mentality about him to be able to do that. But the problem was that in a lot of his trips to Australia, he came back with injuries, whether it was the cruciate knee injury, and this time a minor hamstring injury in March. And he also had a half and half injury blighted season in League One. Not as bad as this season, but he picked up things like soft muscle injuries and that type of thing. I think in September of this championship season, he suffered a groin injury as well. And he aggravated that while he was warming up to be able to get back in. So whenever he would have a spell of games in the championship to try and get used to the level, that ended immediately again with an injury. And then he would try to come back, and then that would be aggravated, and then it would go back to the drawing board again. There were some reasonable performances in there, even though he didn't score any goals. There was a 3-1 win at home against Preston North End, where he was able to link the play a little bit better. That's probably one of his weaknesses, though. He's not the best at linking the play with the wingers and attack midfielder, for example. He's almost as if he's the end point to whatever build-up play that Tellin wants to be able to do. I think that's probably the best way to get the most out of him.
I just wonder, kind of hearing some of the stuff that you've been speaking about to him, because I was speaking to my friend Keith, and he said Tallin's style isn't really to get a striker that is going to be that out-and-out goal scorer per se. It'll be more maybe on the wingers from some of his style, but potentially that striker is going to be used to link up the play, which we saw Kevin Nisbet do quite successfully. So there's maybe going to be some concern around that from some of our fans, but also I'm sure more concern around his injury record, given some of the injuries that we've seen this season, and whether that is because Jimmy Tallinn wants his players to be extremely fit and pressing the ball. But I also wonder, we've sat on this podcast before and accused Jimmy Tallinn of not having a plan B and maybe being able to change things up top. So what would be the key strengths that Yengi would or could provide us?
His best bits, like I mentioned earlier in chatting, very, very good at harrying individual defenders. He loves those individual battles, and that's something that he's very good at. So he's good at the physical side of Scottish football with that alone. He won't be knocked off the ball an awful lot. He'll want to get on the ball all the time. He does lose the ball sometimes, but that's a nature of why he wants to have those individual battles with defenders. He's going to lose the ball a fair bit. Again, not like a out-and-out target man who will hold on to the ball and then slip it into a winger. He will be looking to be on the end of those through balls and those long crosses, or low crosses, excuse me. And out of possession has been his biggest weakness, especially with the pressing. Some Pompey fans described it as lazy.
Yeah.
And in some disappointing performances I remember from this season, he came on against Middlesbrough when Pompey was struggling away from home. We're 2-1 up, but they were dominating possession. And Pompey were trying to press a little bit to be able to win the ball high up the pitch, and then Yengi just wasn't pressing as a unit. He would press in his best performances. He'd press individually against those individual defenders, win the ball high up the pitch, and then play it across. Yeah. But when they were pressing as a full setup, like lots of gegenpressing systems set up, he wasn't following it in the way. He would get isolated an awful lot. And there was another performance where he started against Preston, and there was a little bit of a tactical tweak where the manager decided to play Colby Bishop an out-and-out number 9 further behind him in the attacking midfield role. So it was sort of like a two-striker system, but not really. And he struggled an awful lot against two defenders ganging up on him at once. That might have been just the game itself and the strange tactical tweak. Or it might be the fact that he was ganged up on by a Preston North End side who are very physical, and that was one of their strengths. So that might be a one-off, but he struggled to impose himself on the game in that sense. So if Tallinn is focusing on having a lot of possession and then playing through the lines a little bit, then I can imagine that Yengi would do particularly well. But and then potentially in counter-attacking scenarios if you're either against an old firm side away from home or something like that, and you win the ball on that halfway line, and there's a winger and then Yengi up top just rushing in a 3-on-2 scenario, I think he could be quite good. Yeah. But if you're trying to press as a unit against those sorts of teams to try and impose yourself, I don't think Yengi is that sort of player. Well, he didn't show it at championship level anyway. That was possibly the thing. So yeah, there are some good sides to his game, but the biggest thing to come out of this, and the main reason why he isn't a Pompey player anymore, was his fitness record and the fact that after getting those injuries, he couldn't impose himself at championship standards. Pompey did have an option on him. They could have activated that option for free and then tried to sell him in the summer, but the manager said it was too big of a risk. They didn't want to basically have him stuck on the side, and nobody wanted to buy him for cash. So that was why he was ultimately released on a free. There are some qualities there, but I think for Aberdeen, just from looking at them From almost like a layman's point of view, you probably need another striker alongside Yengi. Yengi's a good complementary attacker, but with the focus on needing him to be fit, being able to get round that and mold him and get used to the new style of play, probably need another striker alongside him, I think.
Yeah, well,
as a
he'll
complementary
obviously
thing.
join the ranks of Esther Sokler, who himself hasn't had the best injury record during his time at Aberdeen, and Peter Ambrose as well. I suppose the less said about him and his time at Aberdeen so far, the better. We haven't as yet taken up the option on Obde Dabag. Could this be the Obde Dabag replacement? Could it be the Kevin Nisbet replacement? Obviously, we still harbour hopes to see one, if not both, return to Pittodrie. I do feel with the addition of Yengi, it is a good addition. I totally understand the risk around his fitness, but given that we're going to be playing Thursday, Sunday, could Yengi potentially be brought in for those Sunday games when we need to give the starting lineup a rest from the Thursday night? Risk does seem to be a key word associated with this transfer. Some will say low risk, given it's a free and it bolsters a position that we needed bolstering, Freddie. But given his injury records, specifically last season, and you allude to having some injury problems during that League One spell as well, where do you see this as a risk from Aberdeen, given it is a free transfer at the end of the day as well?
It's a tough one because just double check. He was signed on a 3-year deal, wasn't he? So it's quite a reasonably long contract. The club are giving him. Okay, it could be a risk worth taking because from that League One season, he was able to get the most out of not a lot of minutes, and that was the fact that he was a supplementary player. And physically, I've seen him physically be up to dealing with League One defenders in a very physical league like League One, where it can turn into lots of elbowing and shoving off the ball, lots of shirt tugging, that type of thing, which Scottish football does have a bit of that as well. But the concern is obviously it depends if he's able to get over that the knee ligament problems he had this season and also the soft muscle injuries. And it depends also how often he's going away on international duty and how much that will break up the cycle of getting into a rhythm, because that was one of the main reasons why it didn't work out in the Championship. Was he played 2 or 3 games, end up going to Australia on international duty. He's performed well for his country over the years. He's scored goals in qualifiers, but it was the fact that he would get that injury on international duty, go back to Portsmouth, spend 2-3 games on the shelf, then try and come back in again, and he wasn't at the pace. And that is something that might concern Aberdeen fans a little bit. And
I suppose caveating that a little bit is if he can get himself fit. Australia qualified for the World Cup in this international window, which we're still in, because the football season hasn't quite finished yet. So there is a motivation there for him to not only get fit but stay fit, because as you said, he has performed well for his country. Some people will diminish that record at international level, given the quality of opposition that Australia tend to play in these qualifiers, although I'm sure Japan and Saudi Arabia might have something to say about that, given their World Cup appearance records and given Scotland's performance on Friday night. I don't really think we're in much position to criticise other international teams. I thought I'd get in there before you did, Freddie. One other thing I think, you've mentioned there, the risk that this transfer potentially possesses. Fans will also want to know, I don't know, I was going to say what his best position is, but can he play out on the wing or either wing at all, or is he best in that 9 role?
He is best out and out as the number 9. He's very much not really a winger. He's creative in a sense of he can play reasonably well with a strike partner or an attacking midfielder that's going all the way up to him to link the play a little bit. Not as good as, let's say, a target man striker would be, for example, but he can do the simple individual passes to be able to deal with that. I think he's wasted playing on the wing personally, and I know Aberdeen sometimes play a back 3 and sometimes play with a back 4. If you're playing a back 3, I wouldn't have him as a wing back at all, because he's not good enough defensively. If you're playing just a traditional 3-5-2 with strikers, I would just have him as the one striker alongside somebody else. That's probably the best way
Could
to
he
get the
play at the
most out of
10,
him.
kind of helping a number 9? No.
I don't think so. He is very much the focal point with that, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's just getting the most out of him.
Yep.
When he's played sort of out of position at Portsmouth, it hasn't gone as well. Like I said, the little creative bits that he has are very much basically you would essentially be putting a striker out wide, and we've seen sides across the years many times want to try and play strikers out wide. If he's part of, like, let's say, like a front three, if you randomly play a 4-3-3 for a game, he could probably be central to it and sort of float in between the wide areas. But if Tellin sticks him out wide the whole game and says, "Okay, your job is to run at the fullback and then put crosses in," I wouldn't at all. It's very much a striker's pick, this transfer. Yeah. I know it's not the flexibility that some would want, but I would. But again, when you're looking at roles for players, I just want the player to be very good at that role and let them stick to it. And then if you have versatile players elsewhere in the squad, then you can manage it elsewhere, to be honest with you.
No, I think that's fair, and I'm sure people will be happy to hear it's an out-and-out striker, not someone that can kind of be tinkered with in that sense.
Yeah, he's not a winger who has played up front. No, he's not that at all. He's very much the out-and-out number 9. And again, he supplemented Colby Bishop by being that different sort of player, the player who wants to run onto the ball, has a fair amount of strength in those scenarios. But yeah, like I said, the biggest weaknesses were obviously with the injury record, but the fact that he didn't impose himself physically at championship level with the pressing and other things. So that's something to consider.
Yeah, and I suppose that will maybe be not the best place to end on, but something that will maybe stick in our mind heading towards the preseason and seeing how he fares in that. But I suppose from an Aberdeen point of view, yes, it is a risky strategy, given some of the stuff you've highlighted, but feels low risk if he can stay fit and hits the ground running and provides us goals in the top end of the pitch, and also provides us an option. Let's just remember some of the redemption arcs that Jimmy Tilleen's managed to turn around of players this season. You look at Pape Gay in the first half of the season, Shayden Morris across the whole season, and what a useful impact sub he's been. Could Kusini Yengi be that impact sub for us next season in the forward area for someone getting on the end of those Shayden Morris cutbacks? But for the time being, Freddie Webb from the PO4Cast Podcast, thank you very much for your time and insight into the Don's latest signing.
Oh, not a problem at all. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolute pleasure getting you on. And thank you very much to everyone that has tuned into the podcast, whether it be here on YouTube or on our audio platform of choice. Remember to follow the podcast on audio, like the video, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and stay tuned across our social media platforms for some upcoming Scottish Cup final charity fundraising merchandise that we're hoping to launch in the next couple of weeks. And I'll also be joined by Michael Grant to go over the season itself and another chance to relive that Scottish Cup final. So until then, thank you very much for tuning in.